What's going on, ProGuides family? I'm Renox, and in today's video, we'll be looking at the top 10 AK tips to help you improve. We'll first be going over some of the more basic tips, and then towards the end of the video, we'll be looking at some of the more advanced stuff. So no matter what rank you're currently in, we'll have something that'll help you out. With all that being said, let's get straight into the video.
Also guys, I just wanted to mention we are doing a huge Black Friday discount this Friday, November 27th, giving over 50% off our memberships. To get the discount, use promo code BLACKFRIDAY.
Alright guys, starting things off, the first thing that you got to do to use your AK-47 to its maximum capabilities is quickly checking out its recoil pattern. In Counter-Strike, all automatic guns have a set recoil pattern. This means that you can actually learn what the recoil pattern is, mimic the opposite, and be very, very accurate. You'll never be able to actually achieve 100% accuracy though, as there's this little thing called spread, which is just a bit of randomness to not make learning the spray brutally overpowered. But what you can achieve is really solid accuracy and spray control, which can even allow you to transfer your spray from one target to another, potentially even acing your opponents with just one transfer. You don't have to be aiming for massive multi-kill spray transfers right away though. Instead, it's actually better to start off simple. Spray at a wall and look at the pattern. Do this a few times so that you can see all the little randomness there is and how much you can control it, then try to start controlling it. You'll want to be doing some controlled sprays at the wall, and then once you start to get the hang of it, you're going to want to move on over to the Recoil Master community map to practice your recoil further. By spending just a little bit of time in this map every day, you will definitely be able to see some massive improvements really fast. Before we move on to our second tip though, it's time for our question of the day. Today's question being, what do you prefer, AKs or M4s, and let us know in the comments down below why. Personally, it's just gotta be the AKs for me. The one-shot potential is just mwah, and if you manage to hit your shots, you can just kill people so damn quickly. If you prefer the M4s though, or even want to get better with them, don't you worry, as we're gonna have a video launching about how to use the M4s really soon. For now though, we'd like to hear your opinion on which one you like most, so be sure to let us know in the comments down below. Now, for the second thing that you should definitely work on, especially related to spraying, is crouch spraying. Crouch spraying is simply just crouching to make your shots easier to control and to hit more shots. As you may have noticed when you were practicing your recoil, like our previous tip mentioned, the AK-47 has a quite rough vertical recoil. The gun spray does go up quite a bit. This can be counteracted and made easier by doing the aforementioned crouch spray though. If you crouch during your spray at the right moment, so not as you start firing but about half a second later, you crouching will actually pull your spray down quite a bit, meaning you have to adjust your crosshair less. On top of that, it has the effect that your head hitbox is now moving, which makes it harder for your opponents to headshot you, unless of course you're playing against players that are already aiming at your body anyways. But even those types of players will likely lack the recoil control to pull down enough, ultimately meaning they'll be shooting over your head. Another thing that you should be looking at when you're trying to improve your AK game is your crosshair placement. Crosshair placement is when you tactically position your crosshair to make sure you have to do as little aiming as possible. It essentially comes down to preemptively placing your crosshair at head level as you peek an angle, instead of only moving your crosshair to your opponent's head once you spot them. By doing this, you'll manage to shave off quite a bit of time that you normally would have spent aiming, meaning that you'll be able to react faster than your opponents. In the higher ranks, a lot of the time, a duel is decided by the first shot or two. Because of that, you'll definitely want to get off the first shot. That being said, that doesn't mean that you should come around the corner while already firing just to get the first shot. Rather, you'll want to peek it so that you'll hopefully have to do little or even no aiming at all, and you'll only have to do a quick counter strafe and a one-tap combo. If you're a new or even more experienced player, you should really be focused on having perfect crosshair placement. Even if you're already out of silver and maybe even in Supreme, or hell, even global, that doesn't mean that your crosshair placement is perfect, and it is definitely something that you should continue working on. Something else that you need to have a big focus on is using the right shooting styles. We actually already have a whole video covering just that topic more in depth, so make sure to check it out. It's called the Ultimate Aiming Guide, tapping versus bursting versus spraying. To give a quick TLDR though, and once again, this really misses some of the better intricacies and subtle differences, so we really recommend that you watch the full video. But in general, at short range, you want to spray, at mid range, you want to burst, and at long range, you want to tap. Spraying, of course, being trying to kill your opponents without letting go of mouse 1, bursting being shooting controlled bursts of between 4 and 8 bullets depending on how skilled you are at bursting, and finally tapping, of course shooting each bullet individually and waiting quite a bit in between each shot to allow your inaccuracy to reset. By doing this, you'll usually be most effective at each range and be able to get more kills easily. The next tip is a bit of an obvious one, but it's also one that people really need to hear, and that's practice, practice, practice. When it comes to rifles, and since the AK-47 is definitely the one that requires the most amount of skill, it is especially relevant. You really need to practice in order to become better. In CSGO, the team of better individual players is usually the one that wins, except for the highest level of play, where it's all about team play first and then individual skill. But in your own matchmaking games, where you and your teammates aren't put on a leash and are essentially free to do whatever, it really just comes down to how skilled everyone is. If your team is more skilled and able to win duels easier, you'll win a lot more of the time. To get better, what do you need to do? That's right, practice. If you want to become a better player mechanically, practice your aim, practice your counter strafing, and practice your gun control. That's the only way to really get better at it, just like all the skills in life. The pros like Nico and Simple spend most of their day practicing with both their team and individually. Of course, it'll be real tough to just get in as many hours as a top pro, but the closer you get, the closer you'll eventually be to their mechanical skill as well. Something else that's important to think about is what you're up against. When you're on a full buy on the T side, you should consider each and every round, what kind of buy you should expect from your opponents. You can also do this by reading the economy by looking at the loss bonus, how many rounds your opponent have won or lost in a row, and most importantly, how many players were left alive in the last couple of rounds. On the CT side, if you win and only have 2 players survive, you will generally lose money. With 3, it stays more or less even, and with 4 or 5 players alive, you will gain money quite rapidly. Look at how many rounds your opponents won or lost in a row, and see if they have a good buy, a weak buy, or a buy that'll barely do. If you're expecting a really strong buy from your opponents, it's probably best to invest in some extra utility to deal with the ops and AUGs that your opponents will likely get their hands on. Additionally, you'll want to avoid long angles unless you're absolutely sure that there is no AWPER watching it or if it's completely smoked off. If your opponents are on a weak buy though, you'll want to do the opposite. You won't have to worry about utility all too much, and you should instead focus on playing longer angles to use your AK's range to its maximum potential. If you're up against a buy that's scraping the last bits of money out of the bank of your opponents, you want to make sure you're a bit careful, because aside from the deagle that one player is rocking, they might have a hidden op somewhere as well, just hoping and waiting for an overextension. It's very important that you read the economy and know what you're up against to make sure that you use your AK's strengths and respect its limitations as well. At first, it might be a bit difficult and you might guess wrong, but by going back in a match and looking at where you predicted wrong is a really good way at getting a better understanding of it. At the end of the day, if you're learning a new skill like reading the CSGO economy, it's gonna take some time to learn, but once you do, you'll be a better and more successful CSGO player. The next tip on the list that's especially relevant on the T side when you have an AK is shoulder peeking to counter AWPERS. We already talked about avoiding AWPERS in the previous tip, but sometimes you simply just have to face them. If that's the case, make sure you shoulder peek. Shoulder peeking is when you slowly jiggle to clear angles. The key difference between a jiggle peek and a shoulder peek though is where with a jiggle peek, you're looking to spot the opponent to easily pre-aim them. With a shoulder peek, you're instead looking to only expose your shoulder to potentially bait out a shot. Please note that when you do this, you yourself won't be able to spot the AWPER, but instead, you'll notice the AWPER has spotted you by trying to shoot you. But don't worry, as long as you shoulder peek correctly and don't overextend, the AWPER will miss and you will know exactly where he is. The next tip on this list is just a quick reminder that you can always buy an AK without head armor. Sure, it's not optimal, but as long as you are able to headshot your opponents first, it doesn't really matter. This is especially relevant on the 3rd round, after you lost the pistol and eco round. If you lose pistol, it can be really rewarding to buy a deagle on the 2nd round. If you do that though, you'll be left with at least $1,350 in the bank, meaning that you'll have at least $3,750, which is enough for both an AK with full head armor, but also is enough for buying half armor with some utility, which could be useful in some different situations. The next option you have of squeezing your economy to its lengths is getting out a hero AK. Sometimes one player has a lot more money than the rest of the team, or maybe they were forced to save. Either way, having a solo AK is actually quite viable. If your team does have a star player, giving him an AK-47 and hoping for the best might actually just win you the round. And remember, even if one player fails but dies in a not completely hopeless position, a teammate can still pick up the AK and the next one in line can give it a try. That way, you'll essentially have 5 chances of getting a pick. Surely one person will succeed. The last AK economy tip, and with that, the last tip for today's video we'll be giving, is the idea of force buying AK 2nd round if you got the bomb plant but lost pistol. If that's the case, you'll have at least 2 players that'll be able to drop over an AK in return for a deagle, and most of the time, you'll even have a player on your team that can buy an AK plus armor for themselves. Ultimately, you'll be left with a buy of something like 3 AKs and 2 deagles, or even 3 AKs, a deagle, and a scout, for example, which up against FAMAS's and MP9s will usually be able to give you a free round, even resetting your opponent's economy.
Well guys, that's gonna be all for now. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. While you're at it, don't forget to head on over to ProGuides.com, where you will be able to find some of the top-ranked coaches that will help you improve and reach your full potential. We've also got some great courses on our website, one of which was actually made by the Navi star himself, Simple, which will definitely help you learn. With that being said, we wish you all a great rest of your day and the best of luck improving. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all in the next one.